service. US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met today briefly on the sidelines of Pope Francis's funeral before it started. White House Communications Director Stephen Chung has called the meeting a very productive discussion. Reportedly, the two leaders will also meet later today. The two also engaged in conversation with French President Emmanuel Macron and UK Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer. As you can see, the visuals are playing for you there in St. Peter's Basilica. Trump and Zelensky, both accompanied by their wives, were sitting in the front row of the funeral in St. Peter's Square, but were separated by nearly a dozen leaders. Moreover, the funeral, Trump found himself surrounded by some of Ukraine's strongest allies. Behind him sat Polish President Andrzej Duda, and to his right was France's Emmanuel Macron and Finland's Alexander Stubb. If you have just joined us, we are covering the funeral of Pope Francis, who died at the age of 88 years old. His body is now being taken to St. Maria's Basilica through the streets of Rome. As you can see, the visuals we're providing you, thousands and thousands of people are lining the side streets of Rome. Pope Francis in a wooden coffin there. This comes in a backdrop of Trump and Zelensky, who have just met prior to the funeral. Attendance, world leaders from every corner of the globe, including Prince William of the United Kingdom, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife. You had the President of India in attendance. You also had dignitaries from all over Europe, all over South America. Argentina's Javier Milei was in attendance. And we will continue to bring you more updates of everything that happens. We are now joined by Joshua Barnes, anchor and correspondent located in New Delhi. Joshua, what updates have you got for us?
Well, yes, Thomas, I'd like to pick up on some breaking news that we have reported on this meeting, of course, that took place between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. Images and information around other participants in a conversation, notably being the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron. Now, these two European leaders have been two of the strongest leaders in terms of support for Ukraine. Of course, Keir Starmer regularly holding defence meetings of Ukrainian allies, and the French President doing the same as well. Now, normally a US leader, a British leader, a French leader and a Ukrainian leader, prior to Trump's administration taking power and Trump's second term in office, that wouldn't have been a surprise or a shock. But given the fact that Trump's rhetoric has shifted more towards Russia, communications have been held directly with Russia. However, of course, these conversations have taken place. Now, it'll be interesting to understand what conversation has been had between Starmer, Macron and Trump, who themselves have had individual conversations in Washington. Now, with Zelensky present as well, I imagine there was one clear message, and that's ending this war, but with support for Ukraine. We will hear, of course, more information and expect statements from world leaders following these diplomatic talks. But let's bring it back now to Pope Francis and his final journey that he is taking, a 6-kilometre journey from the Vatican to St. Maria's Basilica, where he will be buried inside, in private, away from the public. Of course, this moment, a difficult one for Christians and Catholics alike across the world, but a moment of real celebration. Some of the sentiments shared by Cardinal Ray, who was leading the service earlier at St. Peter's Square, focusing on Francis's work and also looking forward. That process will follow a 9-day period of mourning following the burial of Pope Francis will take place, and then it is a conclave to decide who the next Pope will be. Some information about that. That is a private meeting, a private period of time, as it may take several rounds of voting before the next Pope is decided upon. It will be in the Sistine Chapel. The doors are locked and the cardinals are locked inside to avoid any media interference and to also keep the process private. We're also looking at a 2/3 majority that will be needed. Now, historically, there are around
We are now looking at Pope Francis's coffin, which has just arrived at his final resting place of the Santa Maria Maggiore Basilica, where thousands have gathered to watch the funeral in the Pope's final resting place. Crowds are gathering with security surrounding the streets being tightened. And we are now looking at visuals of the Pope's final resting place,